All right, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year once again. This is our first actual show in the new year. Joined once again by an old friend of the show, Steve Moshny. Thank you for coming on with us. If you recall from last time, out there in Truth Noir land, we were talking with Steve last few weeks ago about biblical prophecies and how some of them we see occurring today that foretell of basically like the end times or the second coming and some kind of scary stuff. And so we wanted to follow that up a little bit with some kind of odd, anomalous things we've been seeing basically just in everyday life that has caused some people some concern that keep track of these things. And they have to do with, in the Bible, what was basically described as the mark of the beast. We got into a little bit of that last time, talking about RFID chips and stuff like that. But we wanted to go over that again in a little bit more detail. And so Steve has put some information together to talk about specifically that. And we got some cool pictures to show too about how some of this stuff is occurring more and more in everyday life. So thanks again for being here, Steve.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to be here. So, yeah, one thing we talked about last time, if anybody wanted to go back and see the videos, one thing I talked a lot about was Ezekiel 38 and 39, specifically the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Okay.
And because that's very clearly presented in Ezekiel chapter 38. It's called Sheba and Persia, which are Iran. And just this week, Saudi Arabia beheaded a Iranian cleric.
Oh, yeah.
That caused a huge rift. And it's actually, all the Sunni countries are now taking sides with Saudi Arabia, cutting off relations with Iran, to where we're seeing that this alliance of nations that Ezekiel talked about, it's like it's coming to pass.
It has become even more solidified, it seems.
Yes, it was, and it's very dangerous too. So anyway, but in regard to the mark of the beast, it's a very well-known subject. There's many movies about it. Damien, The Omen,
sure,
all those movies that they made about it and stuff. And as a Christian, the thing that concerns me, is the fact that the Bible does talk about it, and it talks about it in a very frightening way.
Yeah, and very detailed also, as we
Yes.
found out last time.
Yeah, and so that's my concern as a Christian. It's like, why is this such a big deal? And I think it's going to be a big issue in the coming years as this becomes more and more prevalent. And one thing I wanted to just say, that there's several. In the Bible, there's several times where you can see people were marked. I just wanted to, in the very first one is called the mark of Cain. Cain murdered his brother, and then after he murdered his brother, he was afraid. He said to God, if anybody finds me, they're going to kill me. And it says that God put a mark on Cain, and that mark was to protect him. He says, if anybody kills Cain, he will be avenged sevenfold. So it was a kind of a protection to Cain to have that mark. We don't know what the mark is. People theorized through the years, but we don't know what that mark was. But then there's, in the book of Ezekiel, it talks about people who were who used to pray a lot, and they were commanded to be marked. And then there is, in the book of Revelation, which is what we're talking about mostly today, there's what's called the 144,000 Jews. There's 144,000 Jews, 12 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, Naphtali, Dan, Judah, and there's 144,000 of them that says that they received God's name on their head. And they are protected during this 7-year period that's called the Great Tribulation. But there is also another mark, which is the one we're going to talk about tonight,
right,
which is called the mark of the beast.
The much more well-known one.
The one that is on the Iron Maiden album covers.
Well, yeah, it turns out this thing is occurring in so many, like it's not just heavy metal bands anymore. Yeah. It's occurring much more in the mainstream now.
It's very, if you look it up on the internet, you'll see most of the popular singers and stuff are doing something about that. It's just this, But I thought what would be good is to read, actually, this is the most famous verse in the Bible about the mark of the beast, and it's the one that's on the Iron Maiden album cover.
Right, yeah.
It's Revelation chapter 13, which is, Revelation 13 is all about the Antichrist. And it talks about two beasts, the Antichrist and the false prophet. So this verse is about what the false prophet does, okay? It says, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be marked on their right hand or the forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast, the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. It is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Very famous verse, And so this verse, just looking at what this verse says, there's like 8 things that we can learn about the mark of the beast from just this
from
passage.
a very small paragraph.
It's packed, One of the things that we learn is that, which again, what's so amazing about this is that this was written 2,000 years ago. But, this wasn't possible 2,000 years ago. But today it is. The first thing that you notice is it says all. That's universal. It doesn't matter if you're a king or a pauper or whatever, It says all, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave. Everybody. It's universal for the whole planet.
Right.
So, that's the first thing you learn. Another thing you learn, it's on the right hand. It's very specific that it's on the right hand or on the forehead. Number 3, it's used for money. So it's instead of money. We're not going to have money anymore. You can't buy or sell. That means it's for money. It's like a credit card or something. Number 4, the number is commemorative of a leader who was killed and comes back to life, or at least it looks like he comes back to life. And so, this is, again, a very interesting subject that is huge. The number, of course, we learned is 666. And there's 3 very interesting things that this very clearly indicates, which I think we're moving into. Number 1, there's a one-world economy.
Yeah, or at least something that they're trying to push more and more every time you turn on the TV, it seems like.
Number 2, it's a one-world government. And number 3, there's a one-world religion. So these 3 things, I think that if we keep watching just what's happening, there's a belief, and it's not just a belief. I mean, the Bible talks about that in the last days that there would be 10 kingdoms. It specifically says that there's 10 kingdoms in the last days, and that these kingdoms are joined together under the Antichrist. Well, if you look at what like the World Trade Center and the big economic organizations, they have divided the world into 10 kingdoms.
Yeah, it seems to be that, it's not hundreds of nations anymore. It seems to be that there's, you have these trade unions.
Yes, exactly.
The European Union being one of them, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and these large conglomerations of countries now that are beginning to behave as one.
Yes.
And that even recently Africa has now
they are part of it.
Joined the
African Union.
So
and South American Union. There is exactly 10 right now, and they're not cut in stone, but they do exist. And America is part of the North American with Canada and Mexico. And so,
and I remember even on I believe it was CNN that was the one who broke the story, and it seemed like they kind of weren't supposed to quite yet at the time when they were talking about, I forget the one reporter's name, but he said, well, we should all start getting ready to do business with the Amero, that was supposed to be the unification of Canadian, American, and the peso
Oh, okay.
into a single currency, not unlike the euro is, universal
Europe,
in
yeah.
Europe. And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem to be just the stuff of mythology anymore, or, if it is fiction, it's prophetic fiction, that,
It's
for the skeptics out there.
yeah, it's a subject that, especially the 10, I don't want to get off too far into this, but it is repeated over and over and over again that there is going to be these 10 kingdoms at the end. In the prophecies of Daniel, it was the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's image. The 10 toes were the 10 kings. And anyway, but I don't want to get too lost there. But one subject that we talked a little bit about is, about the 666, who is 666,
Right.
And, a lot of people used to try, there's the science that you mentioned, gematria, which is where each letter has a numeric, and the scripture seems to really be very clear that it would be something like that, because it says it's the number of a man and the number of his name, to where it seems like it might be something like that will reveal who this person is.
Right. Yeah, and just to, our pictures are always out of order here.
Okay.
We'll get to that one a little bit later. I had one that was just the Hebrew alphabet.
Oh, okay. Yes.
There we go.
There you go.
And so now this is something that I've heard a lot about, the numeric equivalence of Hebrew characters, and their numerical equivalence. But I've never really understood it past that. I was hoping you might be able to help us out with.
Well, the Hebrew alphabet has the 22 letters, and the Bible is written. The Old Testament is written in just 39 books is written in Hebrew, and the New Testament, which is 27 books, is written in Greek.
Okay.
And so the Greek alphabet has 24 letters, and the Hebrew one has 22 letters, and both of those languages are the gematria, where each letter represents, like A represents 1, B represents 2, C represents 3.
Right. Okay.
So and using that's how they they have used it to try to calculate and try to figure out who is the antichrist, and and many people have done it because the Bible here, it's almost like a commandment. It says, "He who has wisdom, let him calculate." A lot of people go crazy with this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, it seems to. I've seen it attempted by different people with the same name. If someone's trying to prove that a politician is the antichrist, they'll try to finagle some way to where their name adds
Make
up
it
to this,
666.
and as many people that try will come up with as many different ways to do it, and.
I've heard Ronald Reagan, I've heard Barack Obama, I've heard George Bush, all of them. There's some way to.
Yeah, it seems like every single one of them. But you were saying that you can't do that with
the English.
With English,
because English isn't that way.
Right.
It doesn't have that same. But there is something that I think maybe might help people a little bit to understand a little bit about this gematria. Is if you look at the word visa, like the Visa card. The Visa, just very common. It's in MasterCard or Visa, that the first two letters of it are VI, which in the Roman is
which would be the number 6. Yeah.
And there are some people who've said, there's something there, but.
Well, I mean, and just to even, take all the mysticism out of it, at least with the Greek characters, we use that in our everyday lives, where you have, a megabyte of information. Well, that capital M is used because it means 1,000 or 1 million, or the different lowercase means 1, the uppercase, and that's thousands of years old, since the language has been used. in addition to being used to like say stuff, it also was representative of those numbers. So that's not a weird
Way out
concept.
there.
Yeah. So
Yeah. There's one other thing about this. Chapter 13 of Revelation talks about two characters. There's one who's called the first beast. He's what we classically call the antichrist.
Okay.
He's the beast, like the manifestation of the devil. He's appears to be killed, raised again. The whole world worships him. Says, who can wage war with the beast? And one interesting thing is it says that he takes over of the 10 kingdoms. He takes over 3 of them. So, just something to keep in mind there. But there's the other character is called the false prophet. And he's like, it's kind of like, especially like if you go to some European countries, there'll always be the president with the priest, or the main religious figure.
Right, or the king with the prime minister,
Yes.
or something.
Right.
But this is more of a administrator and a religious.
It's a
figure
religious person,
specifically. Okay.
And so it would be like the Antichrist and the false prophet. And the false prophet, there's another technology that is, the only reason I want to mention this is because we're seeing this technology as well. And we're not going to get into it too much, but I just wanted to mention it. This verse about the false prophet, it says that he makes an image of the beast, the Antichrist. And he has the power to give life to the image, to where the image should both speak and cause that as many as do not worship the beast to be killed. Now, one thing is like if you look at, one thing that's been popular lately is like, they had that Michael Jackson concert.
Right, the holograms.
The hologram. He causes the image to speak, and I'm wondering if this technology is kind of what, because he was 2,000 years ago, he's looking, at things that he's never seen, and so.
Right, well, yeah, and it's important to note that the book of Revelation, as it's ascribed to St. John, was a future event being revealed to him, hence the name Revelation.
Right, and in fact, I don't know if I wrote that down. I kind of wanted to write that down. It says at the very beginning, it says, these are things, the revelation that God gave to Jesus Christ to show to his servants of things that will soon take place. I mean, these things are supposed to be taking place soon, and they thought that 2,000 years ago, so how much, closer are we now, But, this is one thing that I wanted to say about this particular verse, about what it says about the mark of the beast.
Okay.
It says that those who do not receive it will be killed. It says, and it specifies how they'll be killed. It says they will be beheaded. And it is a forced. It is not. Right now they do have this in different places, and right now they always say it's voluntary. It's not going to stay voluntary.
Well, yeah, it's voluntary. It's voluntary, but even now, it's with some of these wireless money things, it's not. It's voluntary. You can still pay with cash, but there's some places where you can't. I learned, like, you can't rent a car with cash.
Right.
You can't stay in a hotel with cash. So if not mandatory, it's certainly inconvenient to not be doing these things or be entered into that system right now.
And I believe that there's going to be a social stigma that they're going to attach to it through the media and through the government, that there's going to be a social stigma that if you don't, it's going to become mandatory in more than just one way. Not just that the government's forcing you to do it, but that socially you'll be an outcast for not doing it.
Well, yeah, and even now, there's that kind of joke about people that that are trying to stay off the grid. And there's that whole kind of the only people that are trying to do that. It's like, well, what do you have to hide? Who else was off the grid was the Unabomber, and there's jokes like that get made, but it is it's kind of
social pressure.
Stigmatization of that exact thing.
And there's another verse. I just want some of the verses about the mark of the beast. It says, and another angel followed, saying, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives the mark on his forehead or hand, he will drink of the wrath of God, poured full strength into the cup of his anger. And this is one thing, is chapter 14, verse 9, is that anyone who takes the mark, we're not just talking about the RFID, just because I don't think the RFID is it yet, but the actual mark, because it's not just a mark that you take, an economic thing, it's a religious thing, because those who take it also worship the beast, and to where it's like you're dedicating your life to Satan, you know. And so it says there is no salvation for whoever takes that mark. I mean, it is a red line that there is, once somebody takes the mark, there is no salvation. They will not be saved. It says they will drink of the wrath of God. So that's a very frightening verse about that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then in chapter 20, it says that I saw thrones and those seated on them who were given authority, and the souls of those who were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus and the word of God, and those who had not worshipped the beast or its image and had not received the mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And it's very specific. They were beheaded. And last week, what happened in Saudi Arabia that shocked the whole world? 47 people were beheaded.
Yeah, in one fell swoop. I believe that was one of the largest mass executions that they had in quite a while, right?
Yes, beheadings, and it's becoming very common. We see with ISIS, we see it with Al-Qaeda was doing it, and so this whole beheading thing is coming back, and it's like,
yeah, who would have thought that would have come back into style?
And there's 6 times where the mark of the beast is mentioned, and once it's called his mark, once it's the mark of his name, it's called the mark of the beast, and there's several candidates in the world right now for what is the mark of the beast. I wanted to say some things that Time Magazine said, just because I want to show this is not just some crazy Christians saying these things. This is actually Time Magazine. I got these right out of, this is from the Time Magazine, April 27th, this is 1998. I mean, it's...
was this the one that we had a magazine cover for? Or?
No, but I'm going to talk about that one too next. But this was in 1998, that's 20 years ago,
Yeah, just about.
And it says, this is what Time Magazine said. It says, your daughter can store money any way she wants, on her laptop, on a debit card, even, and then in quotations, in the not too distant future, a chip implanted under her skin. This is 20 years ago. Time Magazine wrote that.
Right.
And then this is, we could show the next picture. This was the article about the Apple Watch. When the Apple Watch came out, it was on the cover of Time Magazine. Okay.
Not that one.
There, right there.
We go.
You can find this online. Look at that, and this is when this came out. I was very intrigued by the idea of having that number on your hand.
Yeah.
And so I read the story, and this is and I said this in the last episode again, but it's so pertinent that I wanted to say it again. The article is called "How Apple is Invading Our Bodies." That's the name of the article. And it says, once you're okay with wearing technology, that's about the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
The only way forward is inward. The next product launch after the Apple Watch would logically be the implant. This is Time Magazine. It was September 10th, 2014 by Lev Grossman. The next logical step is the implant.
Well, yeah, and this, it's been around. Again, we say it, can't overstate it. I think this is the thing that they've continually tried to push on people. And I think I'm a big fan of what I call, or what is called, soft disclosure, where it might not be directly stated, but if you see films. A lot of them deal with this sort of dystopian future, science fiction, where I remember there was one, I think even with Justin Timberlake, that was called In Time, and it was sort of like a Logan's Run
Okay.
type story, but you had the kind of digital clock in your arm,
okay,
and it would set off at a certain age,
Yeah.
and all of your life, your payment for your job was paid to you in time added to that clock, and when it reached zero, you would die, your heart would stop.
Yeah.
And so. So yeah, and I think that's why it causes concern with people, because if they're people of faith and they read this and then they see it talked about in a very mainstream format, like whether it's endorsed, like, oh hey, put your whole life on a chip in your arm, or when they see a movie where it's portrayed in a negative light, that thing that's happening. But it's definitely becoming more and more prevalent.
Yes, and again, not to go off, but I've got this kind of conspiracy theory mind a little bit too. And I was watching this movie.
Well, you're in good company.
I was watching this movie which made almost $1 billion around the world. It was called Hero 6. It's a kids movie by Disney.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's called and what this big white thing is called your healthcare companion.
Mm-hmm.
And one of this thing dies, it goes into this place, this other realm, and then dies over there saving somebody, but then he comes back, and then
he's contained on the
healthcare chip.
Mm-hmm.
They called it the healthcare chip, and I'm thinking, you know what? I think they're preparing the kids. They're preparing the kids for this.
Yeah, I see.
That's my conspiracy theory there.
I see examples of that all over the place, and the one thing that I thought was interesting is that in this paragraph that you read about the right hand and the forehead specifically, that kind of seems to me, talking about the one world government, one world religion, those two symbols kind of seem to me to be a combination of Eastern, with the third eye and the right hand, because they always say, come sit at the right hand of the Lord, or
It's a favor. It's Benjamin, means my right hand,
Right, yeah, and so that kind of, Far East and Near East, where
Let me just also say one other thing about that specifically, about the fact that it's the right arm and the. If you remember from last time, I talked a little bit about the Antichrist, that there's one physical description of the Antichrist we have in the Bible. It's in the book of Zechariah in the Old Testament. And it says that he is, his eye and his right arm are in a sword, his right arm is withered and his right eye is hit. And there are people who think that, well, the right arm and the forehead, or the eye there is close to it's some kind of allegiance to the beast. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that's. Let me just because what is RFID? The radio frequency identification.
Sure.
It's a technology that offers the ability to connect physical measurement in the real world with information that resides in the digital world. And there are 3 parts to an RFID system. Okay. The tag, that's the thing that they put inside of you. The reader, where you put your hand and it, takes out the money or whatever. Right. And then the software that connects the RFID measurement to information in the digital world. So, it's 3 parts. So, and they're doing this already. Like I said, this isn't something that's going to happen. It's already happening. And there's already on the media, on the news, it's, if you look at Brian Williams from NBC, this is before he's the one that kind of had problems and stuff, but
right, yeah, they found some way to discredit him, right?
But not on this particular story, and he says that by 2017, every single person will be tagged. They will have a chip in them. I read one thing, and it's from this.
Maybe he said it too soon.
he said it was going to be in 2017.
Right.
And this was back in 2010, I believe, when he said, or 2011. But I read something where it says that 1/3 of Americans have already been chipped. They already have the chip in them.
Oh, really?
1/3. They did this research. What they did is they took like 3,000 people, and they, they did, and based on that sample of 3,000, which is a pretty big sample, they concluded that 1/3 of the people have already been chipped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I don't believe that that's the mark of the beast, just because the mark of the beast, like I said, is connected to a system of worship as well.
Okay.
And these people who've taken, they haven't necessarily said, well, we pledge allegiance to the beast,
Right.
But I want to say some of the pros, there's pros and cons to
Sure.
having the chip. This is, and they are already doing this. I'm sure maybe you've seen it, but it's been on the news. There's this guy named Tommy Thompson who used to be the Health and Human Services secretary for Bush, or I'm not sure if it's for Bush or Clinton. He took the chip. And he says it's great. He says it's wonderful.
Right.
And here's some of the pros of having the mark. It's a banking convenience. It's a medical identification. This is the big thing that California was doing. It's got your medical information.
Right.
It's global identification wherever you go in the world.
Yeah, global passport.
Yeah. It's paperless currency. Passports. It's a passport wherever you go. They have it already figured out. There's a video, you can see it on YouTube, about how you go to the airport. You don't even have to stop. You just go because you get. They film you.
Yeah, they scan you as you're
going through, and they've already figured this out. And you're in 2 minutes you can get from the gate to the gate. Monitor Alzheimer's disease, your Social Security, prevent child abductions, tracking inmates, prevent political kidnappings. And I've heard, I don't know, that American soldiers are also going to be tagged, so that if they are kidnapped, they'll be able to find them. I don't know 100%, but I've heard that. So these are some of the pros. And I believe we're going to be hearing a lot about this in the media, in the coming. It's going to be through the movies. It's going to be through subtle messages. It's going to be in music, I believe.
Well, yeah, because I've seen these same reports of like, well, have your kids chipped at birth, and if they get kidnapped on the playground, they'll be able to track them, And so there is always that like, oh, this is a great idea, and a lot of people I know. Have their pets
the pets are
for that
already,
exact reason.
Yeah, exactly. They're already doing this with animals.
Yeah,
it's just one small leap, and they know that America is a very religious country, and there is a huge, it's I believe the most religious country in the world. Maybe after Saudi Arabia.
Sure, yeah.
And so
lots of very devout people here.
Yeah, and most of them will not accept this. They will not accept this. And this is now some of the cons. These are the pros of taking the car. What are the cons of it? The negative parts of it. Privacy. Wherever you go, everybody knows.
Right. Yeah. Everything about you.
Yeah. Population tracking. Migration of the implanted transponder, failure of the implanted transponder, electrical hazards. And there's one thing that...
Yeah, because if it goes out, there's your entire life.
Yeah.
You can't buy anything, exactly what they were talking about in the Revelations verse.
Right, and there's another thing that says in Revelation about this. It actually says, I'll just read what it says.
Okay.
It says, and then the first angel went, and he poured out his bowl upon the earth, and there was a noisome and grievous sore upon all the men who had taken the mark of the beast and who had worshipped his image. This is Revelation 16:12. Talks about these sores. Well, these chips, they've done some research on that they have this lithium battery.
Oh, yes.
And if that breaks, it causes these sores inside of you, and so
right.
It predicts that is going to happen, so these are some of the cons, but the biggest con, for me, and like I said, as a Christian, is, the Bible, it looks too much like what the Bible tells us.
Yeah,
to
it's
do.
pretty clear on the matter, it seems.
Yeah. And so, those are just some of my concerns with having something like that, and it was in 2007 that Brian Williams.
Okay.
There is this club, it's called the Cyborg Club, and these are people who always kind of like to be like a couple of steps ahead of the rest of the world, and there's 10,000 of them who already have the implant. They are in Europe, You know,
okay.
and this is like very elite club that have this, and you know they don't open they don't need keys anymore. These things starts their car, it opens their door, it does everything.
Right.
You know, and you're going to have all these conveniences that it's just going to be so attractive. You know, and you know, if you look at the John Roberts, who's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, when he was being when the Senate was doing their vetting of him, Joe Biden asked him a question. He said, you can see it on YouTube. It's exactly, I have heard it several times just because I didn't believe it. Joe Biden said to him, he says, you're going to have to rule on implanting microchips in people. Do you know you are going to have to do that?
Oh, really? I wasn't familiar with that.
He told John Roberts that on TV. This thing is coming, and
Yeah, because if we've learned anything, they don't ask questions for no reason. It's either there's always some kind of intent to it.
Yes, and as we're moving into the kind of the cashless society, and we're moving towards eliminating cash. I had a picture of.
Sure. Yeah.
I wanted to show it. This guy right here.
Yeah. This guy is happily, and I'm sure there's a lot of people here, doing it too now. That I've seen the countertops at stores that have the pad where you can pay directly with your phone.
Yes.
Replace that with your wrist or the palm of your hand, and they're already set up to do that.
It's already been prepared. And this is in Sweden, which is one of the first countries that is going to get rid of cash. They've already decided, them and Canada are very big.
Stated it as a goal.
Yeah, that we're eliminating cash. Because and if you look at us here in America, how much do we use cash anymore?
Not very rarely, often, yeah.
I feel so bad. So many times you walk by the homeless, it's like, you got to get a debit card thing.
Right, yeah.
But I wanted to show this picture specifically. I lived in Sweden for 3 years, and I love
really?
Sweden. But the reason I want to show this picture is because this guy, for people who know music from the 70s, his name is Bjorn, and he was the lead guitar player for ABBA. So from Sweden, that's kind of why I wanted to show this. And this picture was in the magazine. So, but this is the. I kind of feel that this is where we're going.
The way it's going, it seems.
We're moving towards.
Well, yeah, this was just kind of a goof that I found, but yeah, apparently someone figured out that if you add 666 and 666 and 666 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, you get our current year. So apparently the apocalypse is going down within the next 12 months.
Next 12 months, huh?
You heard it here first.
Well, people are always doing stuff. The Bible says, Jesus said something very, very clearly. He says, no man knows the day nor the hour. No man. He says only the Father knows the day and the hour.
Right.
But the Bible does say we do know the times and the seasons. And from the prophecies and from what we're seeing in the world today, I do believe that we can very clearly say we are in that time right now. And I believe that this thing with the RFID, I think it's going to come down really fast.
Well, yeah, it seems like everything, regardless, like technology, political situations,
alliances,
the prevalence of funny cat videos on YouTube, like there's only becoming more and more and more and quicker. The last bit was a joke, but yeah, talking about all of this 666 stuff, let's see, nope, we'll have to go the other way. That these things are starting to appear in corporate logos, and I know a lot of people are like, well, that's just that's a depiction of the particle accelerator. Okay, well, that's just a funny color wheel. That doesn't mean anything. But this kind of symbolism occurs in this is the logo for a death metal band called Deicide. And these are self-professed Satanists. They make no bones about it. their name means to kill God,
Yeah,
right?
deicide, homicide, killing God. Yeah.
Right. And this is a symbol that they use pretty commonly.
Yeah.
That is they call it an occulted 666. So occulted means hidden.
Okay.
And that's what these things are. They're hiding these things in plain sight, it seems.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me like when you have a group of no bullshit Satanists using a symbol like that, and then you see it in kind of hinted at in other logos,
one thing that I did too is that, like, with the I love rock and roll. I love the rock music, and yet there's a very big presence of this, especially with the big like the heavy metal type groups.
Sure.
The group like I mentioned already, Iron Maiden actually had the album called was it called The Mark of the Beast?
It was The Number of the Beast. And before the song, they actually quoted that verse.
They quote the verse, yeah.
And it very prevalent, in heavy metal. Some of it, you could say, well, it's just symbolism.
Or they're just doing it for attention and stuff like that.
And I would say maybe, in the case of Iron Maiden, there's a lot of other stuff. They sing about a lot of like historical and mythological stuff. And if you take that one song, the Number of the Beast, as an example, it's actually in the huge minority of topics that they sing about. But there, like we were just talking about, there are other bands that are like, nope, we're all about it. We're all about singing songs about the devil, and they use that kind of symbolism in not only in their branding, but also very heavily like in their lyrical content.
And there's this other thing too that I wanted to mention. It's called the Very Chip. This was the big thing in like 2007 when, especially in California, where they were dealing with the health. It was a health thing to put all your health information on your body, so that if you pass out in a restaurant, they'll be able to know you're allergic to penicillin or whatever, And the Very Chip, there was a lot of fear with that this was going to become a required thing, throughout the country, and this, but there were many people that did receive the chip, and I haven't heard very much about that, but it was called the Very Chip, and it was like a some kind of bio identification thing that they were doing, and then there's also this thing, I heard about that. I've heard this before, and that is that America will likely resist this, would resist this system more than anyone, because there's such a huge evangelical Christian population that knows these things and doesn't want it.
Right, that's actually familiar with the material.
Right. But it might be easier, and they are doing this already in other countries. If you go to third world countries,
right,
and to have that, due to where what happens is it kind of, you become
well, yeah, it spreads.
It spreads. Everybody else is doing it, and then after that would possibly bring Americans to also accept it. I don't know.
Well, we're running short on time, but yeah, I mean we've seen these things happen before. Even when there's opposition to something, all that happens is something terrible happens, and then everyone's like, oh, now we're all on board now.
Yeah.
We got to go to war, or we got to get the microchip, or whatever it is.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we're unfortunately, I could talk to you about this stuff all day, but maybe again one time in the future.
Yes. Yeah.
One more time, thank you, Steve, for coming on. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
It's always fun to come.
And all y'all at home, wherever you're going, get there safe. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.